Hi friends, welcome to Medium Unlimited. My name is Sin Lagos and I am so happy to be here with y'all again on Motion Mondays here on Adobe Live. I'm excited because today we're gonna be a little bit messy. We're gonna be exploring some cool techniques, old film techniques in Adobe Premiere. So open up Adobe Premiere and check it out. Let's explore what we're going to be working on today. All right, so we're going to be exploring some old double exposure film techniques. And let's take a look at this here. I see some folks here on the chat as well. Woohoo! All right, I see Keys, I see Wade, so awesome. I'm seeing some conversation about John Travolta. Ooh, okay. Some cool combos always happening on the chat. Let me just check in with this here and take a look at what we got. All right, so that should refresh that. All right. Let's see here. Awesome. All right, so this really cool video right here. So I was playing with a lot of different textures and different color modes in Adobe Premiere, Photoshop. And I thought to myself, what if I can recreate this in Premiere in motion? Is it possible? So I'm going to show you my workflow to recreating this, the best options for videos, and also the different effects that took place in order to create this really, really awesome effect that I absolutely love. So let's jump right in and start exploring. But before we do that, I have a quick cue for y'all. So what is your favorite shortcut at the moment? At the moment right now, my favorite thing is to be able to toggle between modules with a shortcut. I do this a lot because my workflow often goes from desktop to laptop, which means I go from a big screen to a little screen. So finding myself around Premiere is vital. All right, so let me know on the chat and let's jump right in. All right. Okay, so let's start to investigate what we've got here. I definitely have set this up for our success. And I want to point you towards this line right here. So I have my list of things that I think are gonna be vital for us to be able to recreate this effect. Okay, so what I've got here is a portrait, right? So in this case, the portrait that I started with in Photoshop is in fact a movie in this version, right? So an actual moving video. And then I have textures and some more videos. So it's all about layering. So in this process, I really encourage you that this is purposely meant to be messy. It's interesting to me that we're so precarious about the technique of most of our crafts, but we don't allow ourselves to mess around with things and really sort of destroy them a little bit and find different variations by doing that practice. So that's what I've accomplished here. So let me start from scratch, and I'm actually going to delete everything. And that's going to be like, well, hold on. How come you're deleting everything? What are you going to do? So the reason why I'm able to do that is because I can hit Shift-1. See, those shortcuts come in handy. And I know that in here, I have multiple sequences. So that means that I'm not affecting my original sequence, which actually lives up here. So that's what sequences are for. They're essentially different projects. In case you had that question, I feel like that question was prevalent for me for way too long while I was playing with Premiere. So this is my working file right now. And I'm gonna go all the way to the beginning and open up that working area. So I've already defined here on the sidelines that I am going to use this track for portraits or silhouettes. I'm gonna use this one for textures. Again, very textures. I think textures are gonna be a very important emphasis in this process. And then I also said it would be cool to introduce a landscape. So as a result, I've imported all those assets because we have to remember that Premiere is a place for really assembling our work, right? So I think of Premiere as a place that I can bring everything that I create outside of this space, right? Like I'm creating them in Photoshop, I'm creating them in Illustrator, all of these different spaces. I want to be able to bring all of those ingredients into Premiere to assemble them, just like puzzle pieces of sorts. So that's what I've got going on here in my desktop. I have all of these different folders of ingredients that I often tend to resource, right? So things like B-roll for me working, B-roll of the city, B-roll of the office, and so on and so forth. And I kind of leave that as a form of a shot list also mentally, so I can think of my production part just as well. So in this case, we have B-roll of the city. So I'm gonna double click here. And you can see I have like a pretty small version, but if we click this button right here at the very bottom, you might not be able to see that here, but let's give you a better shot here. Ooh, let's turn that off. Okay, so in here, we've got all of these different assets. So in here, I have my landscape, some cool shots I took in Colorado where I had like the mountain in the back with the snow, which is really neat. My friend slacklining. So I thought those could be cool candidates when it comes to this session. And then I started also exploring other things. So for example, the portraits that you just saw earlier. Let's go into where I have those. I can always right click any of my clips and find reveal in project. This is often how I find my way, especially when working in a tiny little screen. Mana says from Brazil, my favorite shortcut is Control M. Control M to export and to stop working. Oh, that's perfection. I think, yeah, I can totally agree with that for sure. I definitely think the moment you're ready to export and you know you're completely done with your project, it seems to never arrive to me, for me anyways, because I feel like a lot of times projects can go in so many different directions. So I want to talk about, all right, our main candidate here is going to be our main portrait, right? So in this case, we played around with portraits by exploring something in the white background, basically in a clear background. This is not a white background, but this was very helpful for us to be able to have good candidates for this collage, right? This double exposure collage. So that's going to be important. I picked two because I think of a sense of variety is always helpful in any work of art, right? So I love being able to create a variety of like bigger scales, smaller scales, different color palettes too, right? So variety tends to be very welcoming in any composition really. So that's, if I can give you a pro tip today, that would be it. Okay, so let's find my way here. So I've got those two. By the way, this is a module that I've created for myself. And I love saving workspaces, right? So I'm gonna save this as a workspace. This is one that I made especially for y'all, so you have enough visibility. And so I'm gonna put MU workspace 2 because I already have one. But that's how you do it. I love saving workspaces. It's so important just to create the right space to get to work, right? So I've got this too. I'm gonna point you to something really fun here actually as we continue on. So I love being able to create these really fantastical elements of footage to bring into things like this using helpers like this. So I have this filter that creates a kaleidoscope effect. And I wanted to show you that. So if you're wondering, how did I make this clip, right? How did I do this clip right here? That's how I did it. That is not a Premiere effect. That is the kaleidoscope during production, that the kaleidoscope filter that it placed right on the lens. But in this case, it was just a creative direction that I felt was the right decision to make in that moment, because I knew I was going to come here and start texturizing and adding really scrappy elements. And so that fits the bill, right? So when we're playing with creating footage, I encourage you to find elements. This is what I used to use before. Okay, y'all know I'm a fan of using props. So I used to use this to create this effect before these very smart individuals created this filter. I also use things like this to create different warpy looks. And I encourage you to try any prop that you find around and put it in front of your lens, because it can quite literally create some really, really, really neat effects. Like, look at my hand there, or my glasses, maybe. You can see my glasses. So yeah, I absolutely love playing with things like that. But that is you taking care of, essentially, you're taking care of the ingredients that you're going to be creating and assembling and bringing into a concept like this, right? Like collaging system. All right, so as we move towards the creation of this process, now that we know what our ingredients are looking like, I want to be able to put them in order. This is gonna be important in this part most of all, because the layering of our files is going to really impact. So let me just zoom in here. It's going to really impact the order in which they blend together, essentially. So you can reorganize these and switch the order. They're going to give you different results potentially, because the layering is so important in this process. So, okay, let's create our assembly here and continue on. Let's see, we have some more answers to your questions. I forgot I took off my glasses, y'all, so I can't see the chat. Okay. So it says the camera effects you can always better than post. Oh, in-camera effects can always be better than in post. Yeah, sometimes. And you know what? I often keep like random textures around. Like I just cut a piece of plastic that wrapped something that we bought. And I just kept it. I just kept a square just in case I can use it to diffuse light, just in case I can use it to create textures during production. It can get really fun that way, right? All right, so we're going to move this little section. I've already decided on my in point and my out point. So I know I want to bring these in, and I think I'm going to put them at the very top. And then for the first one, my main hero video is going to be, let's get out of this one here, and it's going to be this one, right? So in this section, there is a really cute section here where she, I was directing her here. It's kind of cool because I was definitely looking for some profile shots. She got really into it eventually here. And so I love it. I love those little moments right there. So I recorded this in, I believe, 60 frames, so I can have opportunities to slow it down. So we have some options here. I definitely wanted a profile. So I told her rotate profile to the left, rotate to the right. And so we have some options. I'm not gonna peruse through all of my in and out points, possible in and out points here. But the goal here is to have that hero shot, is turn off this track, that hero shot here available for us. Okay, and now we're gonna treat this hero shot because I need it to blend without blending colors as well. So in order to do that, I'm gonna go to Shift 6. So for me, Shift 6 is effects because I've established that in my shortcuts. And I bring that up a lot because I noticed that has always been a game changer for the reason why I can meet most of the timeline challenges that clients often give me, or my own pre-done challenges that I give myself. So I find that keyboard shortcuts are just the way to go, no matter what you do. So I often find myself recreating these. So for example, I can search effects here, and I have in here in place, teeny tiny, I got Shift 6, Shift 5 for effect controls, Shift 6 for effects, because I notice I tend to use those in tandem. So that makes sense for me. And that makes sense for the way I use my keyboard as well, right? So keep that in mind, folks, because I think that can be a true game changer in your development of like learning Adobe Premiere. So I am here, Shift 5 for effect controls, Shift 6 for effects. Okay, and I'm looking for different stuff like Shift 7 could be audio, Shift 8, and so on and so forth, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's super cool. Actually, it can get really fun, but you can always have, you know, your access to your program and so on. So let's go here into the Lumetri Color in this case. And what I want to do is treat it so that the color is not impacting my color modes, my blending. So I'm gonna go into creative actually, and under here I have things that are already filters that I've gathered along the way from purchasing, supporting other artists, or just filters that I get access to. Super cool. Or things I've saved myself, because you can always save your own Lumetri color effects. So I have here Noir, so black and white essentially. And so that is the filter I'm applying to this. I know I need to also apply it to this one though, right? So do I go about it that way? Do I go again into the Lumetri Color? Or I can also, I mean, yes, I can do that. Or I can also go to Shift 5. When I press on the first video, you're gonna see that the Lumetri Color is in fact there, stored on effects. So I can just copy it, click the video clip on the timeline, and then go to effect controls. You see there is no Lumetri. We can just paste it. We can paste it directly inside the effects controls. So that is a wonderful way to just place those attributes in there readily and fairly quickly. Because if you make any modifications on your first clip, for example, you can just copy paste it on the next one, and also stack a bunch of stuff too, which is really neat. So again, I'm going to turn this off because I think this video is probably for later. And I think I'm going to put it at the very top, right? Just based on my discovery of my earlier collage, I thought that was the best fit. Depending on what you use, remember, use 2 varied clips to create intrigue. That's the reason why I create variety most of the time. If at any point you're like, why is my artwork so lame? Maybe it doesn't have enough variety. That's often the case, right? Let's see the chat here. Is that in log still or simply unsaturated? So it is, I shot in S-Log3. So it is completely flat. It is, I shot it with my FX30 Sony camera, video camera. So I did not add my Sony S-Log on this. So this is plainly adding a filter, not a LUT. So it's just a creative filter on top. It will react completely differently if I add a LUT to accompany this as well. But this is exactly what I need here. We're not being too precious about the technicality of our video in this case, because we're looking to kind of let it roll free and mess with it, experiment with analog artifacts like textures. So that's the goal in this project. All right, so as we are revisiting our project, we see here that we also want to introduce some gradients into this shot, right? So another thing I want to do here before we move on, actually, we're going to hit Shift 6 to go to our effects. And in our effects, I want to look for something called Posterize. Now, this is, again, has been a discovery process coming from Photoshop, my workflow in Photoshop. And in Photoshop, I use a Posterize effect. In fact, you can see how it's going to look here when you add the Posterize effect in here. In fact, I used it for my recent visit in San Francisco, where we were celebrating Adobe Firefly's 1-year anniversary. And I was able to use this effect as well to be able to create a really neat collage, but not a video collage like this one. So I thought that could be really cool. How about we use it in video as well? So here we are in video, and we have this posterize effect. So you'll notice that it reduced our colors to some minimal numbers, right? We have right here about white. We have a sort of a mid-tone gray, maybe something like 10%, and then something like, 70% here and 80% here. And then we got 100% black in some places. So we can mitigate that. We can go to Shift 5 to control the attributes of that posterize. And in here, we'll see that it has number 7. That means 7 possibilities of layers between shadows, midtones, and highlights. That's kind of how that works. So if I put here 2, right? Now this is going to reduce it to 2 colors, right? 2 lights, not colors. There's no color here, but 2 lights, right? Lights and blacks, basically in this one. If I put 3, then it changes it to lights, blacks, lights. Okay, highlights, shadows, and midtones. We only see 3 available in this one. So that's really cool to play around with because that gives it this really neat texture here. Enough texture, enough visibility of the outline that I asked her to create, right? Like I wanted that silhouette-y look and I wanted a profile shot. So I've got texture and I've got all of these different colors looking very cartoonish and kind of neat. So do notice it's pretty heavy on your files. You'll notice that because in my working area, I've got this red line down up here that lets you know that it's fairly heavy on your computer. So keep that in mind. I often have to kind of work slowly when I'm playing with something like this or one at a time because it could be a little bit heavier. If it's yellow, it's not as heavy. And of course, if it's green, that means everything's rendering and everything is Gucci, as they say, right? So we're going to continue our layering process. And so I'm going to go into Shift 1. I love storing any visual effects or textures within a folder called VFX. So hopefully from here you're learning. I know it's very tiny, but you're welcome to screenshot this and get a bit of like the methodology of how I organize myself because this is one approach that really, really works for me. And I've started to develop my own templates in order to just start from here. It's already, all of these folders are in here. If you're interested in learning how to do that, let me know. I'll love to explore it and provide some cool resources for y'all. If this is something of your interest, I find it super helpful. So I'm here in textures, and in textures, I'm going to make this gigantic and big so you can see it. We're gonna go to this cam. All right, so in textures, I brought in a bunch of different textures that I made myself. So all of these textures, all they are different generations I made on Adobe Firefly, which to me have these textural gradients that I love borrowing. It could be super, super fun. I don't know why I picked these because these are not actually commercially, they have still the old artifact of that it wasn't commercially viable yet, but whatever. Use good assets, y'all. And then I have these cool things, which are basically halftone dots, or in this case, for some of these, let's go into Shift 1 again. We've got those halftone dots. We've got halftone dots with color, with only black and white also. So, I've got a gradient. This is something I like using a lot. It's called reticulation because it looks really organic. Looks a little bit different from noise, which could be a little bit more leaning towards the tech reference as opposed to the organic texture that you find in plants. It could be a little bit different. So we're gonna do a quick demo here in Photoshop so you can know how you can create one of these yourselves. I think that's always really important to know how to create your own ingredients, even if they're available anywhere else. I would say that in my learning process, I have always found it really, really vital to always recreate anything, any asset that I ever find useful. So if I download assets from any Adobe stock or whatnot, I try to dissect it, try to recognize its patterns, and try to recreate them myself. And then maybe I find that I make something completely new out of it, right? So that's always really important. And here, what I'm going to do in order to show you this is I'm going to go, let's go here. All right. So we have these asset files here, right? All right. All right. So what we can do is right click any of these and we go into, let's go into edit in Photoshop. All right. Edit in Photoshop is way down here, folks, all the way at the bottom. And so there is a direct link, a direct point of communication, if you will, between all of the Adobe ecosystem programs, because, you know, the folks at Adobe understand that that's how we work. We often work, you know, in tandem with one other app, or we're working in like, you know, a trifecta. I often work like with 3 or 2 apps at a time. So it's pretty neat to have this workflow, to be honest. So I'm going to go into Photoshop here. Let's see, I think my Photoshop opened on my second screen. Come over here. Here you are. All right, so I'm in Photoshop beta, it looks like. It looks like I created this in Photoshop beta in case you're wondering if something generates a little bit differently. Photoshop beta tends to have some of the most recent updates to things. We don't need the timeline here, but essentially this just opened up on Photoshop fairly easily. So what I just want to demonstrate for you is how to recreate this texture right here. So you see there are halftone dots in this case, so that you can create your own patterns. These are going to be some of your favorite things to have in your collection. I use them all the time for 2D, 3D, motion, you know, still photography. It could be anything really. And it is fairly helpful. I'm just going to use this file to demonstrate how I do it. So let's start from a blank space. And so it would be something like this. What I often do is I create a gray color palette. A gray is going to be most effective for halftones because it finds the black and white. I don't know how it does this, but it does. If you use black, it's not going to work. So I'm going to introduce that color. All right, I'm going to introduce that color in here. Okay, so as I do this, I want to be able to go then into, let's double click this so it is no longer locked. And I'm going to go into pixelate and hit color halftones in here. And just, I'm going to bring this to your attention right here. So what this is our color halftones and all of our different channels. So you can decide whether you want a certain number of color visibility to show up. So that would be the CYMK, I think it is. Hold on, RGB, gosh, I don't know, but it is definitely dealing with color palettes here. So if you leave one off at 0, it's not going to be 4 colors, it'll be 3. So this is more about the circle radius. So the max radius, meaning the size of the circle. So should we, if we do something like 4 being, I think, the minimum, and we press OK, they're really, really tiny. So it's kind of perfect for texture, right? Oops, I undid it there, but you can see that. And if I do, again, pixelate, color halftone, and I do something like maybe 22, the circles are gigantic, right? Like they look like this. Okay, another variation that I absolutely love playing with is going into the, okay, filter gallery. Okay, so in the filter gallery, you're going to find reticulation, and reticulation has this really organic look to it that doesn't quite look like noise. It is still noise, right? But it is very organic. I don't know how to explain that, but that to me feels perfect for adding texture to skin without it looking tech-y, because noise, the granular kind, comes really from, you know, think of TV, right? Like your TV tube, when it would turn off, you see that noise. That's where that is born out of. And we are now just using it all the time to hit that nostalgic button, right? So let's get back here into Premiere. Hello, Premiere. Where are you? All right, there you are. Let's get back here into Premiere and continue to add our layers into this effect. So I'm gonna start adding some of these. So you can see here, I've got mine. I've created mine in 1080 by 1920, by the way, which is exactly the size of my sequence, I believe. But yes, the idea is that you make it large enough. These textures should be large enough and usable during these moments because they're also high resolution, right? So I love exporting in PNG for that reason. JPEGs are a little bit lower resolution. So I'm going to bring in the first texture. Favorite part. Oh my God, I got so excited I punched the microphone. Okay, so I'm gonna get to this part here and check in on y'all on the chat. Yes, sometimes this could be straining on older computers, absolutely, but you'll be surprised how much a computer can take. I put mine through a lot, so you'll be surprised, quite frankly. Okay, cool. So drop in any more questions if you have them, any more comments as we continue on. This is one of my favorite parts of the process. We're gonna go to Shift 5 and we get ourselves back into the effect control panel. And in here, we're gonna find opacity. Under opacity, so I'm gonna direct, I wish I could make this bigger. If I could make this way bigger, it would be perfection. Let's see if I can help here. No, it is what it is, okay. So in opacity, under effects, what we're going to find is our blend modes. And there is, of course, our favorite blend modes are always visible and they're just the best across the board, right? And I love using them all the time. So all of these are going to give you a different result each and every time. So I'm going to like just press one right here. And you can see here, we have now gone from our Posterize effect to this really cool blending of the halftone dots. And the thing is that this isn't a photo. This is a moving video. So it's absolutely amazing to be able to see your moving video and this sort of textural analog effect just by introducing a few textures in here and creating some super cool layering and color modes. So let's continue exploring some of these color modes here. I'm going to put it to fit so we can see everything. And I notice that a lot of these in, for example, in screen mode, it's going to blend all of the blacks, all of the whites, and in anything in this section is gonna do any of the blacks. And then we've got these really gnarly ones here. It's called difference, for example, can do something really, really strange once you start getting to the bottom here, especially if any of these have color or have any degree of color. So if I turn off the Lumetri Color, which had the black and white effect on it, and I add a exclusion mode or a difference mode, any of these are absolutely phenomenal to me because it always gives me a different like outlook. Like, look at this. That is, it looks like the scrappy papers posters I used to pick up for like my favorite punk band, right? Like, it just has that kind of thing. Of course, some of these, you'll notice here, like it's not showing you in the playback. That's because it's heavy for it to render, right? But you do see it here and you will see it in your export. Just give it patience, give it time. So this is one of those things where like you kind of play around with different modes depending on what color palette your image has. You'll have different results in that case. So let's do something like, let's do something like difference here. And then I'm just gonna double in this timeline here. What I'm going to do is, instead of doing all of that over, let's extend this over here. We're just gonna add it again at the top. And it's the same texture so far, right? But one of my favorite things to do is go to my menu here. And I love being able to change any of these clips, but keeping the properties of that clip, whatever I've done to it, whether I scaled it, whether I keyframed it, anything, I want to keep it. And so I don't want to have to redo it all over again. If I choose to change that clip to another clip, right? So a way to do that is, again, shortcuts, amazing, right? Let's say I add this texture as a texture, this Adobe Firefly, really batty motorcycle that I created that I was trying to play with mixed media. I'm like, what if a motorcycle had fur? It would be amazing. So I love the color palette here, and I have learned to detect when something's going to blend really well. And I felt like this could be a good candidate for that. So I'm going to pull only the clip, not audio or anything. We don't need audio. And I'm going to hold Alt over this clip. You'll notice it's smaller, which is totally fine. We're going to hold Alt and you'll see that it turns on almost. That means that we're inserting it within it. We're not just inserting it, we're replacing it. We're substituting it. So you see now it has this, it has the motorcycle in it. And I'm hitting Command Plus there to just enlarge it. And so we can have more visibility of our clips and what clip we are working on. And so that is that one. But you'll notice it has already all of these properties on it. It already essentially has that color mode introduced in it, which was, albeit not that complex, right? Like we did not do that many property changes to this clip, but that one is already there and introduced. In this case, I think my one hiccup here is that this file is not 1080 by 1920. At the early stages of Adobe Firefly, I don't think we had that available. Whatever the case, try to pick stuff that are good, but even if they're not exactly perfect, like let's say you had to stretch it and you're like, oh my God, the pixels are getting funky, which by the way, you can try any of these other blend modes. If you think, oh no, but I stretch this and this isn't 1080 by 1920, I've got a hack for you. I always go to Shift 5, Shift 6, right? I go to my effects and I find the blur. And this is when I start piling in effects and it gets a little slower, but I don't care. I always try to do the most of the mostes in my apps. All right, so I'm gonna bring in Gaussian blur into the motorcycle. Nothing has happened yet, but it is introduced into our effect control panel, right? Because it's a new effect we can control. And so what we're gonna do is hit that blur. And now I get to have the gradient color palette, almost like the structural part of the image, but it's blurry and it's kind of cool. And now it blends in as a texture truly because it's indecipherable. Like it's not as distracting because it's not our main hero image anyhow, right? So you can play with different, ooh, that's kind of cool, right? So a lot of different things could happen here, folks. I'm gonna introduce this black and white one here, and we can also do some different color modes here. I think I wanted to do maybe like a hard light for this, and you can start to see how all of these other effects begin to play a role here. Let's see how this looks so far. Gnarly, right? So I think that's interesting, completely slightly different from the other one, but that's all based on our color mode variation, our color mode choices. And so as we continue here, I think I want to make this symmetrical. So what I'll do in this case is I'll bring in this layer, which happens to be the kaleidoscope secondary hero image, and I'm going hero video clip. In this case, can you tell I have a background in photography? I'm always referencing everything as photo, basically. So in this video clip, this copy that I've created here, I'm going to select it and I'm going to go to Shift 5. Shift 6. Literally everything you want to do, if it occurs to you, it's possible. There's an effect for it that already exists. So I want to be able to flip this over horizontally. So is there an effect for it? I literally had that question right before I ever found it. I'm like, there has to be a way. So it's literally called flip horizontal, flip vertical. And it's an effect in itself. So there you go. We've got our flip. Did you miss it? There you go. So if we go to Shift 5, we have our horizontal flip in here, or in our menu. So now we have these two sort of symmetrical, really cool, I don't know, like album cover. That's the vibe that it's giving me. And then I can continue to play with this. Of course, there's like so many variations to this. So let's say in that process of replacing those textures, I want to play around. Remember, this is really, I can't like encourage you enough that this is really a playful, experimental facet that I want you to try out on your own. It's not about finding the right way to do this, but more so finding what other ways are there to do this. Like, is there a texture that has come to mind? Is it flowers? But you can make it into like multiple patterns, right? I'm thinking of so many ways to bring in assets and ingredients into this and blend it together with your video clips to create this really scrappy look. There's so many opportunities here. So I'm gonna replace one of my textures here as well from here. So let's say I wanted to add a track here. I want to add another texture, but I don't have another track. So let's go into the left hand side and right click and say add track. And it's going to immediately add it up above the one that you selected. So we want another texture here. So I'm going to add it here and we're going to replace that clip. It has some properties on it that we want to keep. So we're just going to replace that clip from one of our sources in our texture folder. So for example, in this one, I have a bit of an orangey sort of halftone. Is it halftone? I think that's like a noise texture, and the noise texture translated like this. It's really cool, y'all. Like, I love this effect. And honestly, it's just about having the right ingredients, the right hero video clip that has a clean background, because I made the attempt on other video clips and it wasn't quite working. So that was a very important element during this whole thing. I think I'm going to change the color mode of the last one. Let's go to Shift 5. I think it was maybe this one. Yeah, let's try, instead of difference, we start to play with maybe divide. Soft light. Ooh, that's a beautiful amber color. That looks gorgeous. And I'm looking for true, like a visibility of my center image. It seems to me like I can't really see myself as well or as pronounced as this one. So one of the ways that I like to mitigate that is maybe my black and white needs to be reversed. Or maybe I need to choose a different black and white. So if I was to go to the Lumetri Color in here and choose a different black and white, that might give me a different result in my Posterize result, right? So like something like this, you can see it picks up more on the outer side, right? And if we do something like color, it also picks up a different texture. So be aware of that, because that will definitely start to give you different results. I love that teal orange. It's absolutely beautiful. Let's see how it comes out with this. Press play. Oh, okay. I kind of like it, right? It's definitely one of those things where maybe I can go back to my Posterize effect and dial up that number. To maybe a 4 or something like that. So and then what can also help is just playing with different ways of, there you go, that soft light. That soft light allowed the bottom image to come through a little bit more. So in this case, and I think that's really cool. So I'm going to show you, like, for example, in this one, okay, I've had this as footage, right? I couldn't work with it because Oh, I just pancaked my layers, my timelines without meaning to. Did you just see that? That was total accident. So because our modules are able to move at any given point, I could move my timeline and pancake them so that I can drag any clip over to the next layer if I choose to. That's a way that I often work when on the go, because I work on my laptop, which is fairly small, and I think I'm gonna upgrade because it's too tiny. And the pancaking is just perfection. So that was a nice little bonus there, because that was totally accidental. But yes, I have several timelines here that I've been working on. And in this one here, I noticed that I was trying to do this. This is a portrait, but it had a very, very busy background. So we weren't able to use this. This is an example. It's not a good candidate. However, something like this could be perfect. So another thing that we can introduce here, aside from landscapes, is, for example, in here, I'm gonna introduce, sorry, I just gave it away. Aside from portraits and textures is landscapes. So that is what we're going to introduce into this one. I'm gonna go into Shift 1 and do one more texture here, go into city, because we got this really cool shots of seeing the trees from above that we saw earlier, right? So let's try one of these. I don't think I need the pancakey timeline anymore. So we'll get rid of that so we can have our full timeline. And you can see how I always toggle between different sequences here. All right, so we've got that. And in here, in this little empty area, I want to introduce my clip. So I'll introduce that clip here. It looks like, to me, oftentimes, I like to have handy my info or my metadata dialog box. So if that's not available, I'm going to go here to info, and I'm going to move that over to my left-hand side to get it out of the way of my preview, and just find it here, info. So when I click anything, then it'll tell me, oh, okay, you filmed that at 60 frames per second, 1080 by 1920, or this is a 4K footage. So this is one easy way for me to know what options do I have with my footage. It turns out I recorded it in 30 frames per second, no, 24. I mean, it's going to be great because it's 24, but it means I can't slow it down. But it's informative, nevertheless, right? In this case, some of my other footage, I shot everything at 24. I know who I was kidding. Yes, everything 24, 4K. Then we got 24, 4K, everything. All right, so we've got this texture here. And what I want to do as we are closing in, I want to include this gnarly texture. We've got this video clip of our tree, but you notice that it isn't coming out. Something is happening there, but it isn't quite clean. So I'm going to do what I did to my previous videos. So you'll notice that a lot of these workflows tend to repeat themselves. Okay, my mic wasn't cutting off. I was just trying to turn it off because there was cleaning outside happening. But yes, we've got different processes that you'll notice tend to repeat. Depending on what you choose, you'll get different results. So I created a black and white here because it gives me a different result when I neutralize the colors of the videos. So I'm going to select that clip, go to Effect Controls, and paste that Lumetri Color in black and white here. Oh, it looks like I had changed it to a different creative color, or it looks like I did teal orange. No worries. I can still change that color here without going into my Lumetri Color module, because I can still have a drop-down menu in here and find my noir color in here. And of course, also any changes you make to the contrast, to the texture, all of that is going to change the way that it blends together. Okay, so that's that. Let's start to blend these in here so you can see some of that texture of the trees coming through. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. All right, so we got overlay, we've got difference. Take a look at difference. Look how it looks. Look how different it looks. That's a whole new look, right? We've got a different color palette. I have not introduced color in here. with without adding in textures. Like the color here is coming entirely from each of the layers in here. So the final thing I would do in this case is I would go up here to sequence and hit render effects into out. This is often something that I use in order to help me run my effects, not run all the clips, but just run the effects in case I'm really heavy lifting all of my effects in Premiere. And then I just walk away. I go and grab a quick tea. Doesn't take that long, honestly. So it's like a really fast tea. And it will do a quick run of all of my effects a little bit more smoothly, right? So for you to preview it before you do your export. So let's take a look at what we've created here. That is so cool. Let me see here. Let's go. Oh, there you go. I think that looks so awesome. And so I really encourage you folks to try out how to explore different textures, analog artifacts within your analog artifacts like scratches and dust and grain and noise that you can bring in by mixing your medium like you do in the way you do your workflows in still photography, like spaces like Photoshop. Mix those mediums and try out those same workflows in a motion space like I did here, because I was totally inspired by a different space like in Photoshop. So hopefully that is a point of inspiration for y'all. So before I head out of here, I want to share with you a few resources for us to connect so you can stay attuned of all the really cool projects that I'm often working on. So folks, this is always super fun for me to join you on all of these streams because it tends to be very exciting for me to dive deeper into my own workflows and really understand what is it that I'm doing in my artistic process of exploration. I've been able to participate on a lot of really cool activities lately, like going to San Francisco and celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Adobe Firefly, and that was absolutely amazing. I loved it. So I welcome you to take a look at my website where you'll find my Adobe Firefly post where I share a lot of the insights that I've learned from creating Adobe Firefly generations as a photographer, and all of the different lessons that have helped me understand AI and the place that it has in my storytelling, the different expressions that I find myself turning to. I think that is always so much fun. So thank you folks again. See you on the next one.